I'm Scott L. Miller. It is the 24th of October, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Nicaragua, and I had very tight schedule today. I got some of the video recorded earlier while I had some time outside, and the rest, well, I have to do it here in the office, and I'm using the Insta360 Go 3 because I want to be able to get the video out in a reasonable amount of time, and I have to film at night. I had to go into Managua and get my yellow fever vaccine. That's not a problem. That's a normal part of travel if you're a world traveler. So don't panic. That doesn't mean that I've been exposed to anything. But I'm going to be heading to South America, hopefully here in about 10 days, which is the amount of time you have for the vaccine to take effect. So we're going to be talking about that at length a bit on October 30th. That will be on that episode. But for today, that's why I did not have time to get all of the video recorded as I want, but we're going to be talking about a couple things. One is going a little bit deeper dive about fake news and tools you should have in your disposal to deal with that when you're seeing news about here in Nicaragua. The other, we have a viewer question about tsunamis and earthquakes and some of the dangers that you may face if you're going to be living in the beach area of Nicaragua. So we're going to go into that as well. So stay tuned, and we're going to get to all of that right after the bump. Welcome to the show, and sorry for the very messy table that we have just over here. I can't even point to it. It's so weird trying to figure out where things are on the show. Actually, I don't even know what it is they're saying. This is my cup. Wow. The angle of view on this, the Insta360 Go 3 is so wide that I find it very confusing as to just what's going on. But I do like how easy it is to hold and just use for things. And it's my fastest workflow. So when I'm in a really big hurry, sometimes I grab it. I know it gives you guys kind of a different feel. It's a different workflow for me, and it gives me some variety. It makes me happy with making videos. Some of you know that I'm kind of addicted to cameras, so having excuses to use different cameras in different circumstances and different lights and stuff in different circumstances all makes me very happy. So, Bonster Girl, it makes me want to sing every time. Do the mash, do the Bonster mash. All right. She says, thanks for the tour. It makes me, this is one of the days I did a walking tour of Playa Ponaloya. It makes me very excited for my trip in February. I'm curious about all the places on the beach, though. Coming from Washington or Oregon, my first concern is the danger from a tsunami, especially if there's an earthquake from the subduction zone. Also in Washington and Oregon, we often have king tides in fall or winter. They can get high enough to flood parking lots of beachside hotels and restaurants. So you have to worry about them in Nicaragua. So, okay, let's kind of start from the end there, the king tides. We don't really have king tides. Never heard of such a thing happening here. I'm familiar with the concept. I'm not acting like it doesn't exist. I'm not familiar with it ever occurring here. However, it is worth noting that, for example, I spend a lot of time on Playa Las Piñitas, which is the one just south of Ponaloya. So 100 meters from what you see in the video. And there, along with many other beaches in Nicaragua, we will get tides where a good wave will come in and it will come through the restaurants. That is absolutely the case. It is not common. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen, and you will sometimes be in a restaurant and have everyone go running, and it's not going to sweep you out to sea, but it can move all the tables and make a big mess. So it does happen. In the places that I've spent a lot of time in the video on the beach, it is common to have water come all the way up to the walls of the hotel. And those are generally open onto the beach. So if you're sitting at the front of the hotel, the water could be just 2-3 feet from you. And obviously very shallow at that point, right? But that absolutely can happen. And it's worth noting that I think on the day I actually got this question, I was on the beach at night and I went to drive down. I've never seen this before. I drove all the way to the southernmost point of the road just because it's a handy place to turn around on a rainy night. So this would have been on I believe Saturday night, because I was there for the Caracalito fancy dress party for Halloween. And when I went to leave, it had been raining most of the evening. It had been raining a lot of the day, so all the water was high, storm was going on, all that kind of stuff. I got down to the end, and the actual ocean tide was up to the walls of Barca de Oro. It was up over the street. And to get to Barca de Oro, which is where I wanted to turn around, I had to drive through over a foot of ocean water, which is not great for the car. So I was actually in the ocean. on the road in the car, and there's no hotels anymore, but there used to be really small ones. So they're more like Airbnbs now on the leeward side, on the non-beach side of that road, and they had waves hitting them. So anything that was on the beach side was seriously flooded, but there's very little down there. It's the estuary portion. So it should be the mildest portion. And all of that was flooded. And I could not believe. But it wasn't like sweeping people out to sea or anything like that. There were some people out in it, and it's like flowing in and out. And it was probably up to like your knees. But your knees on the road across the street from the beach is pretty intense for it just to have been how high the tide was that evening. There was nothing weird going on. So that stuff can happen. Is it tragic? Is it like, oh my gosh, it's like a major concern? No, not at all. It's not like a big surprise thing. It's not a dangerous thing. But it is something to be aware of. That's a real thing that you brought up. So then the bigger question is, since we do get earthquakes here and we do have an ocean, the Pacific, do we have danger from tsunami? Yes. So they don't hit very often, right? If they did, who would be here? But famously, around 1992, there was a massive tsunami that hit specifically Las Piñatas, right where we were talking about, and it wiped out essentially everything and caused a pretty hefty loss of life. It was very tragic. And since that time, we now have so it's important to go back. We didn't have tsunami alarms at the time. We didn't have the sirens. Now we have sirens, and they test them all the time. And we now have earthquake alerting. At the time, we didn't. So if a earthquake, and she asked this specifically, happens in the subduction zone, if we get a major earthquake right on the beach, there is a small possibility of getting a major wave, specifically a tsunami, right then and there. And it can happen really fast, like, I don't know, 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. I don't know, something really fast, like scary fast. Tsunamis are scary on their own, but when they happen really fast, then they're really scary, right? That's the last thing you want is a surprise tsunami. Could that happen? Yes. There's no record of there being one. No one has witnessed one. Every time that there's a major earthquake, everybody runs out and looks at the water. Like, everyone knows what to do. So that's real, but it's not a concern to the point where like anyone has witnessed it. This is a freak potential type of disaster that in theory could happen, but no one has seen or heard of or have any historic record of. Of course, we said all the same things about Galveston, and then they said a hurricane could never hit Galveston. There's something about it that made it magic, and then a hurricane wiped it out, right? So could a subduction zone tsunami suddenly hit in Las Piñatas? Yes. Can it? Possibly, yes, but that's true anywhere there's water. The fact that there is water means that if the right type of thing we don't expect to have happen does happen, then the thing that causes could happen. Yes. The thing that realistically poses a threat is normal tsunamis, not subduction zone tsunamis, but ones that happen far out in the ocean from somewhere else, right? Let's say somewhere in Asia has a really big earthquake, or Indonesia or Australia, right? And then it comes across the Pacific and potentially hits us. That's what's happened in the past, and that is what the real fear is. And that is worth a very important discussion that at the time that the last one hit, 1992, there was no Pacific warning system. So there was no warning whatsoever, even though there was this giant wave coming across the Pacific. And in theory, there was 9 hours plus to warn the beach. No one knew. The ships that were out there had no one to tell, right? Like, what do you do? And a lot of, normally if you're a ship at sea and you get hit with a tsunami, you're busy with your own stuff. You don't have time to warn other people, right? So I get it. Now there is a series of buoys, mostly deployed by the United States throughout the Pacific, very importantly in Hawaii, and tsunamis that are heading anywhere. Anytime there's a really huge drop in the buoys, alarms go off, including here in Nicaragua. We're all tied together. Nobody takes this as a military thing. No one takes this as we don't get along as countries kind of things. All the countries who participate in this share the information, and immediately we know at any given moment what the drop or rise is on the buoys at Hawaii, which are the ones that are pertinent to us. So we know with many, many, many hours of warning, if there's the possibility of, say, a 15-foot wave has passed that point, we now have lots of warning. They will set off the sirens at Las Piñatas or Point Lawyer, wherever is appropriate, and they have evacuation zones. Everywhere is marked. Everybody knows what to do. And so I think that it is a great question and very important. If you're going to live on any beach, so the first thing for anybody who's going to live on a beach anywhere, be aware that tsunamis are a risk. right? I've seen studies that say New York City has a really high chance of eventually, within the next 100 years, being completely wiped out by a tsunami of such epic proportions that no one can prepare anything for it, right? Like, that's possible. Everywhere is possible. Here, we are in a known potential tsunami zone, not a common one, not a normal one, but absolutely has happened and can happen. But we now have a extensive series of monitoring and warning for that. So the things you have to really be aware of are you going to leave things at home? Are you prepared to get them out? Like, we have dogs that sometimes are on the beach, not now, but they used to be. And there was always someone with them that could get them away from the beach if they needed. We always knew where to go if we were on the beach. We always paid attention to the alarms. We always knew that if you're going to be on any beach anywhere, that is something you must be cognizant of and have a preparation plan. And back in 2016, when we lived in Romania, we made a point of visiting the hotel owned by a famous family who survived one of the really amazingly terrible tsunamis that hit in Sri Lanka, which we'd studied very extensively because my wife was really into the story and wanted to go see this hotel. And we wanted to meet the family, but didn't get a chance to. But when we lived in Romania, it was a big thing that she had been studying that and is very acutely cautious of the tsunami potential. And so we've put more effort into it than most people. So yes, you should be aware of tsunamis. You should prepare for tsunamis. I would not be particularly worried about Nicaragua with tsunamis. And of course, if you're going to be investing in any kind of real estate in a tsunami zone, any beach anywhere, always be aware that you either have to be insured to handle those kinds of things, not keep things there that you don't want to risk having lost that are invaluable, and just be prepared that whatever you could have in a total financial loss, right? Some of you know that I own a house on the beach, and in doing so, right, we always know that, one, it's built to take big waves, and it has taken big waves without a problem. But we also know not to go over the top, not to change the design to not be able to handle waves well. And we always know that, perhaps living there every 50 years, you're just going to lose it to a tsunami and you have to rebuild. And that's part of the financial planning around structures in an area like that, any area like that. Because even with all the warning, we can get out, we can be perfectly safe. We're not going to store our priceless things like our memories from childhood. We don't have anything that's super expensive in cash, but we have things that we certainly could not replace with any amount of money. Those things don't get stored there ever. And we know that the structure will probably at some point be washed away within our lifetimes, and we will have to start from absolute zero and reconstruct. It's part of our financial model. It's part of the decision making of living on a beach. So yes, good questions. But is it something you should be worried about? No, you should not have I don't feel a sense of panic about it unless you are completely non-ambulatory and feel that you would be trapped for 12 hours on the beach and not be able to get off, and that you would be stuck and you would die in a tsunami that you had lots of warning for. Then yeah, beaches aren't for you. But otherwise, I think as long as you're a normal person, you have so much warning, so much, if there's no warning for it and you're going to get hit by a tsunami, one way or another, nature was going to get you, right? There are freak accidents anywhere. Lightning can strike anywhere. Tornado can drop anywhere. A meteor can hit. It would be like that. But for all the normal stuff, don't worry, but certainly prepare and plan and know what to do. And I think you're in the best shape you can possibly be in. All right. I did have someone ask a question or make some comments about some news they had seen. And I really don't know if the news they saw was fake or real. I have no idea if they had a source for it. They may have been really well researched. It was not super far-fetched. It was slightly, seemingly fishy, but well within the realm of what could happen. And I've certainly seen stuff like that here in Nicaragua, and I've seen things like that in the United States. So absolutely, I am never going to say that is certainly fake news, but it did ring with a number of hallmarks of fake news, and at very least, you should be very wary of that kind of stuff. And so that prompted me, I wanted to put together a little bit of a tool set or a way to think about news you're hearing from Nicaragua and ways to view Nicaragua that should help you at least see some red flags when someone tells you, hey, I know this guy, or I heard this story or whatever about something terrible that happened in Nicaragua. You should not live there because, and then they give you some story and you're like, oh, that's terrible. Maybe you should stop and say, I bet that isn't true, because it probably isn't. The majority of the stories that we hear are pretty obviously not true, and some we have no idea. So I wanted to discuss that. So luckily, I managed to record that outdoors, so you don't have to see me sitting here in the office. We're going to jump to the GoPro and go check that out. I want to talk just a little bit about fake news in Nicaragua and giving you a little bit of tools to understand how to identify this. If you live in the United States, for example, which is a giant country with loads of people, fake news takes on a different character than it does here in Nicaragua. In the United States, one of the things that makes fake news so powerful, so easy to have, is the size of the country, with almost 350 million people and a whole bunch of different states and many cities in those states and loads of people who live in those cities, 350 million of them. You have a problem of anonymity, and that's not necessarily a problem. It's also a benefit, right? There's wonderful things about it. You can have, for example, you can make a sitcom that is about a place in America, and you don't have to identify exactly which place it is. You can have all this like very general information, and look at The Simpsons. What state does it take place in? It could be Missouri, it could be Illinois, it could be lots of different places, and the name of the town is very generic. There's ways to pretend that's just about anywhere. Springfield. So when you're dealing with the United States, you get into this mentality that things can be anonymous. You can make news that comes out is generally about some place in America, but not where you are. So there's no way to identify the people, the exact places, the exact details. You have to trust that the news has that information, and generally the news is mostly correct. So that's not so much of a problem, but it trains you that news can be anonymous. When you're here in Nicaragua or any place that's this small, right, you're dealing with a population of just the size of a single city. It's a completely different experience, or the equivalent of a single city, right? So here in Nicaragua, we have just under 7 million people in total across the entire country. And when there's news reports or stories that come out about Nicaragua, let's just take a real one, for example, one we know is not fake news, right? We've had examples where news has come out in the U.S. about an event that happens here. When that has been true, we are immediately, as residents, as anyone who's putting in a little bit of effort, able to say, okay, so this report is about this specific town, and there's only so many people that fit this role in that particular town. It's this person. And we've had reports come out, and we've been able to look into it immediately with, 15 minutes of research, and you have the name, the home address, you know exactly who they're talking about, because it's a single small town equivalent. So if you were to have a news agency in a small city in the U.S. doing local news reporting, you would expect if they were going to report on a traffic accident, it would be in an identifiable location. It wouldn't be on some highway that comes near a city. It would be I-15 in this particular part of town, and you know almost what intersection that it's at. Like, everything can be figured out. If someone has a terrible accident, you probably know who that person is, maybe just secondhand, but you'll be aware. Someone will know someone who knows them, right? That's what it's like here with all of the news. Anything of any magnitude, and everyone knows who it is. You can't be like, and this happened to me just the other day, right? Someone's like, someone's putting in a boat service, blah, 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 going to here, and I'm immediately like, oh, that's so-and-so from my channel, right? It was that fast, right? And it's completely unrelated ways that they got information to me, not intending to get to me through my YouTube presence and my Nicaraguan presence in the same way, and information ended up colliding, and I was able to identify them in seconds for someone that lives quite some distance away. And it's just, we're a small community, and it's easy as a foreigner, especially like big European and North American countries, you're just so large that it's easy to forget just how communal Nicaragua is, and you can't hide things. Fake news it just can't be that way. So when you have fake news stories, and we have a real good example of that is this girl bitten by a rabid cat, and I believe they said it was here in Leon. And immediately we said, okay, well, if that was true, immediately identify the hostel, because the location that they gave only has like 2 or 3 potential hostels that could possibly be. It's not like there's thousands. In the United States, any story would be like, well, there's 1,000 different businesses it can be. This doesn't reflect on anyone in particular, and probably not on any city in particular. But here it reflects on they're accusing a very specific person, and because it was a rabid cat, we were afraid of a cat, biting someone. Well, the information, even though they're like it was so generic, but it was enough that you could pinpoint the cat if it was a true story. Right. So that's really important. So there was all these details that were wrong, right? They couldn't get medical care. Of course they could, right? We talked to the doctors who were literally on the same street as the story took place. That she could have yelled out the window and gotten a rabies vaccine, like all kinds of things. Like nothing in the story added up, from what people told her to what the embassy told her. Like she went to the wrong place for the wrong information, got some, like it was all very obviously fake news, like super obvious. And if you even read the article, you could see there was no source material for it, right? The source was some story, like you travel it back and there was no reporter, no journalist was involved. It was just someone repeating a marketing piece, a propaganda piece. So it was easy to figure out, but it was obvious when you looked at it. And when you're getting news, and the reason this comes up is because this happens a lot. But someone just posted on my channel in the comments about I read, right? So here's the first thing: I read, and there's no details. It's fake news, right? If you read something serious, you would have you don't share that kind of information without supporting documents. Unless you're trying to promote, come on. So first of all, if it's I just read a story, it's just a story. Guaranteed. That's the first thing. Fake news, that's how it works. You always have sources. The next thing was that, this incredibly bad set of things. Like, it's outrageous how bad it was. And it was all about corruption, right? Oh, the cops are corrupt. They set up a thing to scam expats. Which doesn't make any sense because they would not have known it was an expat in the situation, but no one notices that in the story, right? They leave out that wouldn't work that way. They would never know they were hitting an expat. They would likely just hurt a Nicaraguan and get in big trouble. Right, from that perspective. And then it was like all these people were in on this huge corrupt deal. It was the cops, it was the judges, it was the prison system. Everybody was involved in the corruption. Could that happen? Look, it could happen, right? It can happen anywhere. I've had it happen in the U.S., right? Oh, the judge was not on the take, but the cops and a whole bunch of private organizations were, right? A lot of pieces were in place in some pretty serious corruption in the U.S. I guarantee far more than this ever was. And so can it happen? Yeah, it can happen anywhere. But in the U.S., if I tell that story, it's anonymous, right? Well, it could be this police department, that police department, this company, that company. There's all these. There's just so many. You can give a lot of details, and you can't identify exactly who it is. But here in Nicaragua, if there was any details at all, we would know exactly which cop, exactly which judge, exactly where we would have every detail just like that. We'd be able to at least verify that they had looked in and had real people, right? But because there's no details whatsoever, it's very tempting, right, to just make up stories about Nicaragua. And people who don't live here, it's very tempting to just believe the stories that you hear. Yet, when you live here and you see these stories come out, you realize that it's not like 5% of stories are fake. It's like 95% of stories are fake. You can't verify anything that people are saying, and they're very implausible in most cases. And like the cat with rabies story, like, is there rabies in the country? No. Are there unvaccinated cats in hotels? No, not realistically, because they come door to door and give away free rabies shots. Even if you had one that didn't have rabies shot vaccination, would you be worried about it? No, you absolutely wouldn't be worried. That's not a thing here, right? Because everyone gets free rabies vaccination. So rabies isn't a scare, much like malaria. Why aren't we worried about malaria? Because we put in a huge effort killing the mosquitoes, right? If we didn't put in an effort, then obviously it would be a scare. Because malaria is terrible and rabies is terrible. But because they put in so much work, because they're smart about it, and working for the public good, people on the street in real life don't have to worry about malaria or rabies because there's such an immense effort at the government level to make sure those things don't become scary. So if you were bitten by a cat here, maybe if you're in the jungle, but if you're in a populated area, if you're especially in a hotel, someone's pet cat, the chances that they have rabies is zero by all measurable amounts. It's zero. There's no scare at all, right? None. That is not a thing. And there would be, if you needed treatment, healthcare is free and public. All you'd have to do is go into any public institution. They would take care of you, period. Even if you had no money. If you had money, you could go to a private one and get any amount of things. And you would never need to talk to an embassy. And an embassy, it makes no sense involving that. So this story about this cat thing, I have a whole video breaking it down. Makes absolutely no sense. And leaves out all the details. It should be really obvious that it's fake news, but it's really easy and tempting to make these stories because you think that people can't verify them. There's no one who's going to actually look at this and question it. But immediately we said, wait, you're accusing people we know of, one, having a cat, right? Which I don't think they do. And that cat may have rabies and there was all this scare. No, there wasn't. There was no scare about that. It was completely fake. Like the person, they didn't even verify that, this is how far it goes. They take the things that you assume would never be questioned. We can't identify that the story was about a real person being bitten by a cat. Even the subject of the story appears to have been fake news, right? And that's where, like, this story, like, oh, I heard a story that this happened to a guy. Really? Can you identify who this person is? At this point, the story doesn't even have an actual expat that was here, right? So we don't know where this expat is. If there was, let's go talk to him. Like, let's dig into this, right? Let's get some details. So that's a really powerful tool when you're looking at news from here and you're hearing stories, right? If you're hearing them from me, you're going to hear them from me. You can be like, Scott, hey, you claimed this. Give me some backup on that. And at very least, you're getting my word for it. This happened to me, right? It rained on me last night. It really rained where I was, right? That's not someone told me a story once about rain. It rained on me. It's actually raining on me right now. And in this case, you actually have some video proof. You can't really see the rain, but you can see the sky is very, very cloudy, and like it's plausible that it's raining while I make this video, very lightly, obviously. And I can hear the rain coming down on the trees at this point. I don't really feel it. And those kinds of things, those really powerful tools, think about that. This is a tiny town equivalent, and the country's huge physically. So if you're talking about people in a populated area, right, you're eliminating all the wild areas, the big jungle areas, the Caribbean coast, the Corn Islands. Those things. If something happened on the Corn Islands, it would always be on the Corn Islands, right? And then you're talking about a population the size of a tiny, tiny, tiny village, right? 1,000 people. Right, so any story is about real people, never anonymous. It's always an identifiable. Oh, I went and saw this person who makes tacos on the show. Well, there's one person who makes tacos, right? So if you're going to make that story, you're accusing that person. We can go verify it, right? That's how easy it is. So think about stories from Nicaragua very differently, and of course, think about the same thing in the U.S. If you're getting these news reports from somebody said, and it's backed up by nothing, chances are it is fake. It's just you don't realize it because it's so easy to hide that in the U.S. And here, it should be obvious. If you visited Nicaragua, you spent some time, and you started reading the same things that people repost and say, oh, I heard that this happened somewhere, you would immediately say, I don't believe you. That is so unlikely, and the way that you're telling the story is exactly how you would tell it if you didn't believe it yourself, and you were hoping it was true, or it met some emotional need, and so you're repeating something. And humans do this, right? There's a pattern that we use when we don't feel confident in something that we wish was true, and it's not that they want something bad to have happened to someone. It's that somewhere in some list of emotional triggers, it satisfies a need that, oh, the place I live is better than I thought, or this place that I'm told is bad, I have some confirmation that there's some bad things there. Maybe it's not a terrible place, but it's not as perfect as it seems. And it's not, right? There are things that are bad. There are mistakes that happen. There are bad things that happen from time to time. But be really, really critical of reading stories, right? If you're on Reddit, you're intentionally setting yourself up for fake news, right? You've gone out of your way to get fake news. That is not a source of legitimate news ever. It is absolutely garbage. And you know it. You can't claim you don't. No one doesn't know that Reddit is just all fake crap. And there's no moderation, or what moderation there is really bad, right? So don't go on there. Don't pretend you thought it was real. Don't pretend that getting stories of someone said, or I read something online. If it's not backed up, if you don't see evidence, if you don't read it, don't subject yourself to it, and never repeat it, right? Once you repeat it, you're part of the problem. Don't let that happen. And this is something you have to tell everybody, right? We live in the era of fake news. People are being swamped with this stuff. Repeating things that, if you're repeating something like, oh, I heard once a guy knocked on a door and then they threw bacon at him and seagulls attacked him. That's hilarious. Like, it's a good story. Like, whatever. Whether that's fake or not, I don't know. But it doesn't matter, right? You're not hurting someone. Their story isn't about how bad someone is or something. It's just funny. But if you're repeating like a story, oh, I hear tragedy happens. Like, don't repeat a fake mass shooting in the U.S. Yeah, well, people would believe it. They would never guess that you made it up, right? Because there's so many mass shootings that you can legitimately anonymize. And let's put it that way. This report of somebody got a fake traffic ticket because a cop tried to is literally less believable, because it is so easy to verify, than to claim there was an additional mass shooting in the United States. An additional mass shooting in the United States is more anonymous than a fake traffic ticket is in Nicaragua. Let that sink in. That's the level to which the fake news hits us so much, right? And why we're so acutely aware that people are repeating things that are obviously untrue. So use those tools. Don't repeat things that you have not verified. Don't use anything without a source. And critically think, what are the chances that something like this happened and that someone doesn't, if it really happened, if someone was really upset that some huge corruption happened, they would, the moment they could post outside the country, they would name and shame all those people because things would be done. It would cause action to be taken. It would do massive damage to protect other people, to hurt the people who hurt them, to end corruption. If they're not doing something about it, we know for certain it didn't happen, or it didn't happen as they said. Maybe they were at fault. Maybe someone asked for a few dollars, but it wasn't some endemic, whatever. We don't know if there was some foundation to it. We don't even know if the people involved are real people, right? Including the person reporting the story. It happened to me, and they may have never been in Nicaragua, right? Look for the sources. All right, back to Future Scott here, and thank you so much for joining me. Like and subscribe if you'd like to help support the channel, which would mean so much to me and everyone that works on it. You can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. Please take a moment to share this video if you found this useful or entertaining or whatever on social media like Reddit, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all those things really do make a big difference. And if you're looking for any information, contact information, all that stuff's on the page. You can scroll down there and ask questions of your own, like Monster Girl did about the tsunamis. Absolutely, I welcome and love when you guys ask questions or leave comments or just get involved and engage and hit the buttons and interact with the page and all that. That's fantastic. Tell your friends and family about the show. Go out there and get another person to watch the show as well. And of course, for them to subscribe, help make the show possible. And I will see all of you tomorrow.